and what a great day to sew something wonderful. I'm Kia with Kia B, and today we are working on our third clue for the Cotton Cuts Olympia Puzzle Mystery Quilt. That is always such a mouthful. You aren't seeing my face today, but that's okay. It's more about the sewing and getting these pieces made into our very next block. So I've got my instruction sheet here that tells me what our block is going to look like. So we've got our clue number 3 today, but I also wanted to point out that I have my color card sitting with me because I need to make sure that I know which piece is which corresponding letter. So my fabric line is Nadia, and I'm just so excited about this. So I've got this laying to the side as well, and that will help me understand which is which. So like this is my fabric F, this is my fabric A, this is also my fabric A. Then my fabric D is this cute lines with the little bows. And then this would be my fabric E, which I love. I love the teals. I don't think we've had this fabric yet in our clues, so that's really exciting. So I want to keep this to the side so that I just constantly have it. It's tucked away with all the rest of my clues so that I can pull it out each time. I love having this. I think that's fantastic that Cotton Cuts puts that in our subscription for us. So I'm going to keep that to the side as well. All right, so I've got all my pieces laid out nicely here. I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch seam on my sewing machine, and I've got my tiny little Olasew iron that I love, especially for these small little projects. Now, the fabric or the mat that I'm working on today is actually called a Paca pressing mat. You can find all the details and a discount code for that in our description box. All right, so let's get started. So it looks to me like this is going to be our layout, which those are super cute. So we'll need to make 2 of those. And so I want to get our pieces laid out as they should be. So I'm just going to scoot these over here and grab them as I need them. All right, so first we need to be working with D and E. So our fabric D is this really cute lines here. So I'm going to place that there and one here. I love the bows. I think that's so cute. Okay. Then our fabric E. All right. Our fabric F is going to be these triangles here. So I'll lay those out. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, if you aren't familiar, as I'm laying this block out, if you are not familiar with the Cotton Cuts Puzzle Mystery Quilt subscriptions, they send you all of the pieces that you need pre-cut. So I don't have to cut any of these. I don't even have to clip the edges. They're all dog-eared for me, which is fantastic. And so I don't need little snips or anything. All right, let me move my little iron out of the way here. Okay, so here is our block layout. I love this. These traditional sort of star quilt blocks are my favorite kind of quilt blocks to make. So I'm really excited about these. Okay, so here's our first block layout. I'm going to take all of my extra fabric pieces to make the second one, lay those to the side because I won't be needing those just yet. Okay, so very first, I think I'm going to try and assemble this 4 square here. It's a fairly simple standard 4 square, and so I will just lay these right sides together on top of each other, put them through my sewing machine and at a 1/4 inch seam. And we want to press those to the dark side. And when we do that, that's automatically going to make these seams go opposite. And so if you're a beginner quilter, that's really important to know that, because what will happen is that your seams will nest together. We call that nesting in quilting. And that means that when you flip to join these two, I will show you here, my seams are going the opposite direction. So when I flip these over, these go two different directions and they just kind of click together. And that makes for a perfect seam allowance there if you're using a 1/4 inch seam. It doesn't have to be a complete like scant 1/4 inch seam when you're doing this. It's as long as you're consistent. Now these are cut for you to be able to use a scant 1/4 inch seam, so you want to be as close to that as possible. But in your own quilting, as long as you're being consistent in your seam allowances, that is what matters here. So I've clicked my two nesting seams together here, and I'm going to take this to my machine and sew a 1/4 inch down the middle. All right, so I will open these up and I'm going to press toward the bottom. So what that means is I need to set my seam here, which is just laying my iron down, not scooting it across, and then opening towards the bottom here. And because our seams nested together, we should have a pretty point in the middle there. So let's check that. And perfect. So where these four come together, you have an exact point, which is lovely. That's exactly what we want to see when we are sewing those together. Okay, so now what I think I'll do, I think I will sew these triangular pieces together. So I'm going to set this to the one side, and here we go. So we've got two of these. So I think I'll do this side first. So all I'm doing is I know which way my flying geese need to lay, and I'm just putting right sides together, matching up all three of those cut corners and taking it to my sewing machine. Okay, so now I've gotten these sewn together. What I want to do is just press these with my fingers, and that just gives me a slight press, and then I'll come back with heat. So my first flying geese unit is sewn together. So I will just press those out with my tiny little iron here. If you're sewing along, I would love to know in the comments, and I would love to know which fabric you chose. There's my first one, and I want to put it back in place so that everything stays together. So this one, I'm just going to take and turn this way because I know I'm making the exact same flying geese unit. It's just sideways. So these three pieces go together. So I'll take this left side first, match up my three cut corners, take that to the sewing machine. I'll come back and open those with and just do a finger press. And then I will flip this side over, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and again, meet you back here to press those open. Okay, that makes for two flying geese units. Now I'll bring my 4 square over and just make sure that we are still matching our picture here. And we are, which is fantastic. Okay, so now we're just going to assemble this in rows. So I'm gonna take this flying geese unit and attach it to here, this square, attach it to this flying geese unit, and then we will come back and attach these together and our first block will be done. I do have a couple of tips for when you're sewing your flying geese. This is cut on the bias. So if you're pushing or pulling through your machine, you can distort this seam here. And so make sure you're not doing that. If you're not confident, or if you're a beginner quilter and not confident in your sewing skills, you can use pins to pin along this entire area here. And I would definitely suggest that. It's something I should have been doing, but I was being incredibly lazy and not using pins. So just be careful as you're pushing and pulling that through your machine, and also as you're ironing it, you definitely want to press, not iron back and forth. That can also distort your fabric as well. So for now, I'm going to take this unit, put right sides together with this unit, and sew these two together. We'll come back, open this up, and I'm going to check my instructions for which way it suggests that we press this. So it's actually suggesting that we press it toward this inside seam here. So what we would do is actually open the 4 square, or 4 patch, as it's also called, and press our seam this direction. So our seam should be going this way. All right, perfect. Now I will sew this square to this flying geese with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so by sewing our 4 patch and our flying geese together, I looked at the instructions and it said to press it this way. So as we look at this, we want to press our flying geese and square unit this way, and it goes back to that nesting seams together like we talked about before. So now when I flip this over to join these two, my 2 seam allowances are nesting. That means they're going the opposite directions, and they'll just kind of click into place. And that's what I want to hold as we take it over to the sewing machine to now join these 2 pieces together. Okay, so now that this is all sewn together, we just need to press this last seam here. Because this is white fabric, we don't want those seams to really show, and no matter what fabric bundle you have, this should be a light fabric. So we don't want that seam, all that bulk to show. So we want to press down into these more colorful, and that way we can't see our seam when we go to quilt it. So when that happens, sometimes there's so much bulk here, I suggest actually turning it over and then pressing from this side which direction you want your seams to go. A lot of quilters talk about the ease of that, and what that does is just it tends to relax this seam. Then when you flip it over, you can press it from the beginning or from the top as well. So what I'll do is I'll just give it a little bit of a tug on the bottom, press that with a very light hand all the way across, making sure that my seams are doing what I've asked them to do, then flip it over here, and now press from the top here. Now you can press with a little bit of starch, that would be helpful, or a little bit of water, just to try and set that in place. Or if you're using a steam iron, you could do that as well. I would just make sure that whatever fabric you're using, whether you're working with flying geese, 4 patch, whatever, I would make sure that your fabric doesn't bleed when you go to use water. I have had that happen, and I have learned that the hard way. Okay, so this is our very first block, and now we need to make the exact same one, and I won't bore you with that process. I will just let you watch me sew this. And just like that, both of our blocks are finished. So this is clue 3 of the Olympia Puzzle Mystery Quilt for Cotton Cuts. And I love this. Oh, I hope this is a part of something that maybe creates the rest of this star, or even just this block by itself is absolutely adorable. I love how this is coming together. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them down in the comments. I can kind of help you through your steps as you're sewing this all together. Thank you so much for joining me in the hive today for this clue 3 as we uncover clues in our puzzle mystery quilt. All right, thank you so much for joining us in the hive, and you guys have a great week.